Broadcast is live.
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Hello. I need to pull up the chat here.
I need to
see it. Hello. Oh. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Oh, I didn't mute mine yet. Oops. That's why I'm hearing double.
Yeah. So pop out the chat here. Oh. Let's see. Hi, Lizelle, Caitlin, Kristen, Victoria, Chelsea, Daria, Phoebe.
I'm trying to get my thing to load. So hello, everybody.
Same.
Thank you, Megan. I was just telling Lindsay and Kevin that I was hoping the lipstick would distract you from the fact that I didn't get up early enough to wash my hair. So it's like not behaving appropriately at all. So it's like, well, I put the lipstick on and they'll look at that instead of my crazy hair. So
yeah, I'm telling you.
Okay.
All right. So let's give everyone a hello.
Hello, everybody.
I got up at like 1 o'clock. Thanks for calling me out. Number one, but that's not early enough for me to wash my hair and have it be acceptable to be online. Because I meant to get up way earlier. I actually set an alarm, but for whatever reason, it was really quiet. And I needed to get up this morning to make notes and stuff about what I wanted to talk about. And then I had a couple other things I had to do. So there was no time in that 2 hours to take a shower, do my hair, So yeah. Also, I don't know what's wrong with me. I was just telling my husband this, and Kevin, I got 12 hours of sleep Friday night after taking a nap earlier in the day. And then I got 12 hours of sleep last night. I fell asleep around 1:30, slept till 1 today. And I feel freaking exhausted. And I don't feel exhausted in the way that sometimes you do when you get too much sleep. I feel exhausted I didn't get enough. I feel very sluggish. And I don't know. I feel very
I think it's just society. It's tearing us all down right now.
As Bastille, one of my favorite bands, says, it's the weight of living. It's weighing very heavy on me. So
I love that. Oh my God, Angel Writer said, "Girl, we're in quarantine. Who are you trying to impress?"
I told you, it's a distraction. It always, if I feel like I look like shit and I feel like shit, I'm like, let's just slap a little bit of lipstick on this pig and I'm gonna feel a little bit better. So it makes me feel a little bit more put together.
So
yeah,
the book. How did everyone like it?
I was giving everyone a chance to kind of get in and say hello and everything before we, because I got a lot of thoughts. I got a lot of stuff. Also, I'm gonna try to when I get excitable, my tone gets really excitable as well. So I'm gonna try not to sound bitchy or annoyed. I don't know how successful that's going to be.
Lauren, what did the Queen say? I'm intrigued.
Ooh, the Queen's speech sounds like a movie. Well, thanks, Jessica, for coming to hang out.
I don't know what I just did. Oh, never mind. You guys can ignore me.
Yeah, I was doing the Witching Hour live stream a little bit last night too.
I did not because I fell asleep. I wanted to.
Baking a cake, nice.
Right. What kind? Oof. My mom's having us over for Easter dinner, and she got a lemon cake with raspberry filling.
Ooh. I love lemon cake. And anything lemon.
Yes, nice and fresh.
Aaron and I bought some stuff to make cupcakes. We haven't made them yet, but I read online that using mayonnaise makes, Martha Stewart swears by this, that it makes the stuff more moist, even when you use it in frosting. And so I was like, oh, I want to do that. And Aaron's like, I'm not eating cupcakes with mayonnaise, and I'm just not doing it. I'm like, dude, you can't taste these. Like, no, I'm not doing it. So we are going to have a cake off where we're both going to make cupcakes, and I'm going to use the mayonnaise. We're going to see who's better. So, because he was like, I he's like, it's gonna ruin the cupcakes, and I'm not gonna have it. I'm like, it's not gonna ruin it. Martha Stewart says it's good.
It sounds gross, but
yeah, but like you don't you use it for the fat, like you use it instead of oil and like eggs because that stuff's in mayonnaise anyway. But it's supposed to make it more moist because I actually don't like cake because cake is dry 99% of the time.
She's eating bad cake. She's eating bad cake.
Dude, everywhere is too dry for me. The only cake I've ever had that's not too dry is Georgetown cupcakes. That's it.
Well, I do love their cupcakes.
They're the only ones. Oh, the rest of them, garbage. Hate it.
Ugh. Okay.
Okay. Hi, Becca. All right, guys. So, the book. So, if you don't know, if you're just like, where am I? Why am I here? We're talking about John Truby's The Anatomy of Story. This was a doozy to start out with. It was very dense and academic in tone, among other tones. I have a lot of thoughts. I have like specific things I want to talk about. Hopefully you guys do too. But I kind of wanted just to start with what your overall thoughts were. Like overall, like, is this a good book? Did you like it? Did you feel like you learned from it? Was this something you would recommend to other writers? So let's start with Kevin here and see what to put in chat what you thought. Kevin, what are your thoughts? Is this something you would recommend?
I would recommend it to a certain kind of writer.
And who would that writer be? What kind?
What is this?
I don't mean to say like I don't know how to word it. I don't I think it is somebody that needs a lot of structure, like somebody that like loves to write but maybe just doesn't know how to go about it, or is like they just want like some guidance, I guess. I don't know. I don't know really how to describe it. It has its moments that I really liked. So
a moment that you liked?
Moment. It has moments.
Oh, like is there a moment in here where you're like
but overall, like I mean, I'll go more into it later, but I would recommend this to certain writers, depending on how much structure you need as a writer. Like if you are a hardcore planner, I would recommend this to you. So
okay.
Depending on the writer.
How was it for you on a personal level?
For me, I'm a planner and I still didn't like all of it. That's all I'll say. So
because you were saying you would recommend it for planners, and I'm like, I'm a planner who also feels like I have no idea what I'm doing, and I really didn't feel like he helped me know what I was doing. So.
We'll go more into this later, but I think that there are things that you can pull out of it.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the thing. I read a lot of self-help books and like outside of writing, and I love reading them, but there's none that's just like perfect. It's all about pulling out things that really resonate with you, and I feel like that's what it was for me.
I think that's a good point to make.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely things that I liked out of it. But yeah, I think you guys can like tell what my overall thoughts are. I'll give some overall thoughts in a second. Let's go ahead, Lindsay. Lindsay, what are your overall thoughts on Anatomy of Story?
I think it's funny. I think we're all on like a spectrum, and Laura is here, Kevin is here, and I'm here. So this is going to be an interesting live show. I love this book. This is my favorite craft book that I've ever read. I definitely recognize that it is flawed, 100% flawed. I could probably go on about its flaws more than its good points because like that's just easier to rant about. But I love it. I think it is definitely very, very like structured. And but yeah, I 100% agree with Kevin. Like personally, I like to have a lot of structure and then just use what applies to me. So I think that's why I love it so much. I think it's a very in-depth book, and I like that. Again, I can pull what I need. I would rather have too much information given to me and take what I want than not enough and be like, where do I go? So I'm the exact writer I think that Kevin's talking about. I love that structure. So this was tailored to me. However, I can totally understand with different writing processes how this wouldn't work for other people. So
yeah, I think
Laura, take it away.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because I know that part of your problem with Save the Cat Writes a Novel is that you felt like, especially the middle part where things tend to go awry, that you didn't feel like Save the Cat filled that in enough to tell you what to do. Yeah. And I can see where you would think that Anatomy of Story helps fill that in. more like broken down instead of just leaving you out there to sort of hang.
Right.
I don't always like the things like that to do in those. Again, it's just my opinion. And I also think, in all honesty, it has a lot more to do with what type of writing you're doing. Because I feel like, first of all, he's talking about film, which is slightly different than, writing books. A lot of it can apply, but some of it just doesn't transfer over to writing books. But also, if we are applying it to books, I think it applies better to adult literary rather than, say, young adult or genre. He does try to say, well, if you're writing genre, then there's some other things you have to do. And he doesn't really go into it, which is fine. That's not his book. But I just think that that's where the sort of like, I know that YA isn't technically a genre, but if we're thinking about it in that way in relation to this book, there's just so many things that I don't think connect in the same way. Like it feels very like he's talking about like literature or film with a capital F, with a capital L. And like, for example, because he's talking about like what he essentially is saying is that like not all, or no, what is he saying? Not all films have to have these, but all successful films do, right? Like the top ones, right? Yeah. But I would disagree on that, and I can think of examples that don't do that, and so this is, which is why I think he's thinking again of a certain kind of film, because a big example I can think of that was a wildly successful movie is The Hangover. Okay, super popular, made tons of money, people love it. Now it's not critically acclaimed. Okay, no one's saying it's Casablanca or anything, but when you're talking about success, I mean, success is relative, So there's so many of those things that he says all successful films have to have, and The Hangover doesn't have those. So, so again, it's like, I still think, and because he's coming from like an academic background, which I think also happens when you study creative writing that's what it felt like to me, is like, I was in a creative writing class at a university where they're trying to get everyone to write a certain kind of book, as opposed to one that is more focused on like entertainment and, genre, and where you can still get a lot of things out of it, but just differently. But with that said, basically my overall kind of thoughts are it's very prescriptive. I have a real problem with that. Everything is, you have to do these things in this way. And he actually says, if you don't, your story is mediocre.
He does straight up say that, yeah.
He does.
He does. Like, on
swallow.
Yeah. So it's like,
well, here's what I have a problem with that, is that I feel like writing a book, writing a movie, writing a TV show is creating art. And I don't think you can say, this is how you make good art. It's like, who's say like, oh, this abstract art is good and this one's bad. It's like,
that's why I'm trying to say, like, yeah, it has to do with like what kind of art he considers good.
That's what it is. It's his opinion.
Successful, right?
Yeah.
And so, and with that, like him saying things like, "Oh, it's mediocre," blah blah blah. The tone is so douchey in this book. I just can't. Because I am so triggered by like tone, and this is something like when I used to teach, I would just really emphasize with my students. Is it doesn't matter what you're saying. You could be saying the most genius thing that like no one has ever said and will blow people's minds. But if you sound like a dick, then nobody cares what you have to say. Like, because when you have that tone, everyone immediately is like defensive, or like, especially if you come off as a know-it-all, all people want to do is prove you wrong. Because then I just kept thinking that through the whole book. Like, let me think of an instance where this is not true, where you are so wrong. It's just like, I don't like. So I feel like it's taking away from what the delivery, like the delivery is everything, right? It's the same thing with like, if you can't write coherent sentences, but your premise is awesome, who cares? I can't understand it. So that was like that was probably the biggest issue with me. I also think he has an obsession with morality, which I think all stories inherently deal with morality, but he wants it to be explicit and purposeful in a way that I just don't agree with, especially when he says that your main character has to be doing something immoral that hurts other people, or it's not a good story. And I just don't think that's true at all, especially when you're talking about something like young adult stuff, or if you're talking about genre stuff. I don't want all of my characters to be hurting people. And I don't think all books have things that are hurting people. And he specifically says, like, it can't be yourself. It has to be external. It has to be other people that are being hurt. And he says the same thing with your opponents. You have to have an external opponent. It has to be someone who's going for the same thing as you, and you both have to want the same thing, and you're going about it differently. And your opponent cannot be an internal opponent. And again, I don't agree with that. And then the last thing was just, he says that the 3-act structure is formulaic. Yet then he just gives you like a more specific formula, right? He says it's too formulaic, and it's going to give you like this really bland, like formulaic plot. But then he actually specifically like describes his way of doing it as laying different skin on the same skeleton. And it's like, well, then how is that not formulaic? Like,
Mm-hmm. I will say, I think that the difference between a normal 3-act structure and what he does is that in his 22 steps of the story, he does kind of add in like character beats. So you're like weaving in the plot and the character together. And I think it's the only difference. But like, I totally agree. It's like he's saying this isn't good enough, but here's mine, Yeah,
which is based on a 3-act structure where he just beefs it up.
Yeah, exactly. He builds on it, basically. Yeah.
He could have said like it's not intricate enough, but him saying it's formulaic seems strange. Like he should have said like, oh, it's not, here's more in depth. I don't know.
Yeah, because his is so formulaic. Like he's so like, if you don't do this, it will not be successful. It will be mediocre. It will be this, and it's like we so much try to get away from prescriptive writing advice. And so it's just so weird to me. Like, I don't know. And I think that comes from like his own inflated ego that he can't even see that he's, you know what I mean? Again, the tone, right? Like, yeah, some people are saying sort of pretentious. I prefer, douchey and condescending, but I could see pretentious as well.
It just felt very know-it-all, like very, very know-it-all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't think all of it is bad. I definitely think there were some like really good like things in there that I felt that I hadn't really heard before, or maybe hadn't thought about it in that way before, that I felt were really helpful. In fact, what was one that's kind of related to what? Let me pull it up real quick. I don't know if you guys want to.
Here's what I'll say is that whether or not I like a writing book or love it, as I'm reading it, it does help me come up with ideas for books I'm writing. So I'll give it that. Is that like,
yes,
it definitely helped me.
Yeah, I was writing a lot in there about my own book, especially when there are certain things in my own current book that I feel like need work. And then he would say some things and I'm like, oh, maybe that's what it is that I need to do better. Because to some extent, I kind of understand the opponent stuff a little bit. I don't know. I just think it was just like, I think it was a little extreme for me on what he was talking about in terms of opponents, because I do think that there are plenty of books that are successful that there's no real like actual opponent preventing or going for the same thing. Like the way he described the opponent, right? It has to be someone who's going for the same thing, that you guys are against each other. Also, like the fake friend. That's not what he called it, but like
what was it? The ally.
Yeah, like the fake ally or whatever. Like, I don't know. I just don't think all books have those things.
I did realize while reading this, though, is that in my rewrite of my witch book, the main character and the bad guy both want the same thing. But they're going about it very differently. And I was like, oh, I am doing that.
I love that moment. It makes me like feel so smart when something like that happens. It's like, I knew this the whole time.
Like, I didn't need this book. No, I'm kidding. I definitely took a lot out of it. I just, like Laura said, his delivery was a little off for me.
Yeah. I agree. I would agree with that. It's a tough book to swallow, for sure.
Yeah. So I kind of wanted to, though, maybe start with a few things that I did like. because that's a shorter list. Just kidding. Kind of. I do like in the very beginning, I feel like he gives a one sentence definition of a story that I felt was like sort of obvious, but just the way he kind of says it, I think people sometimes get away from. And he says a speaker, so this is the definition of a story. A speaker tells a listener what someone did to get what he wanted and why. And I think that a lot of times when people are tripping up on their story, it's because they don't have a want. They don't have a want for the book. It's a premise and not a want. And I think if we think about a story with that definition, it's like all stories are someone telling you about someone's want and why, like, and how they got it or didn't get it, I guess. I think that's a really important sort of like tenet to stick with, because if you don't have the want and the why, then like the rest of the story is nothing. It's not a story.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I always get really bored too. Like if a book doesn't have a good, like the main character doesn't have a good desire or a drive, I'm immediately bored, because like if the main character doesn't care about anything, why should I?
Right. Yeah.
So,
and I think a lot of books fall prey to this.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially I feel like when there is really beautiful world building and writing and concept is high concept, then sometimes that want, that desire, that drive gets kind of pushed down in the priority list. And so people are so enamored by the sort of, I've read, Lindsay and I've read some books about that, like that recently, that you're just kind of like, but where's like the desire? Where's the interest? And something he says specifically is the desire needs to get stronger or more complex. It can't stay the same. Which is something that I thought about with my own book. That desire has to ramp up. It shouldn't change, but it should ramp up. And a lot of books that I don't like, I've realized it's because of that. Mm-hmm. It's the sort of stasis of like the desire stays the same, and that's kind of a problem.
Yeah, that was really helpful for me with writing, because I realized in my first book I didn't do that at all. Also, with that also goes along with the like reveals, like they should get more and more shocking as it goes on. And I love that so much, because I was reading over that and I was like, oh my gosh, that's perfect. Like, yes, that's how books are explosive at the climax, because it's like stepping stool, right?
Yes. And that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. The books that I like the most are ones that do have those kinds of reveals. And my book has them, but I'm realizing like not enough. And that was really helpful, because I know that there's places in my book where I'm just like, oh, like I don't know if this is like, we keep talking about the swampy middle, right? Like,
yeah.
And I feel like I have that in certain parts of my book, and I'm just like, I'm realizing now that what he's talking about with that is why, right? You have to have it ramping up. A good piece of advice that I got from Francesca Leah Block, she says this, and it's more on a smaller level, but I've always kept this in my head, is every page of your book should have tension. Every single page, whether it's internal, external, whatever. And if you can glance down your page and there's no tension on that entire page, there's something like you're going to lose your reader, right? Yeah. That's when they put down the book and say, I can finish it later. You know, it's like you want people to have to turn the next page. So when you have that amping up of desire, you have the amping up of reveal, you have the amping up of tension, that's what makes a really great book. That's what makes people stay up all night reading it. That's what makes people recommend your book. And we all have to like agree that the best marketing for your book is word of mouth. Mm-hmm. So that's the way, is you want people to be talking about it.
Yeah.
You know, like,
I want to point out really quickly, Lizelle says she's talking about Story Genius, and we were just talking about this before we went live.
Yeah.
I really love Story Genius, and in fact, I think it's a more digestible version of this. So if the tone of this or the complexity of this or just whatever doesn't appeal to you, a Story Genius is perfect. It's like my next favorite craft book. So definitely would recommend if you can't stomach this.
Yeah, it's funny though, because we were just talking like what the next book is that I planned out, and it was between Story Genius and a different one. So it's not going to be Story Genius. So, but Lindsay recommends it. I'm definitely going to check it out.
Yeah, they're by well, I don't know if I can say it, but they're by the same author. Yeah. So yeah.
Spoiler alert. Not that much of a secret. We'll talk about it at the end.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. Yeah, but I do think that sort of momentum is super important, and you have to keep in mind that one sentence that he says, that a speaker, the whole point of the story is the speaker, whoever the writer is or the narrator, the POV, is telling the listener what someone did to get what they want and why. You have to remember that, because you get away from that and like all your little monsters and mermaids and spaceships and all that stuff doesn't matter. It's just fluff, you know, it's just there. It's accoutrements to nothing, you know? So he and kind of going along with that, he has another sort of like quote that I thought was really interesting, because we know the quote from Shakespeare of, I think it was, you know, Hamlet, or I don't know, I'm probably wrong on that one. But you know, the I think therefore I am, but stories are, you know, he says that they are I want therefore I am, right? So it's not about thinking, it's about wanting, and like that really has to be the focus of your book, is the want. And I've so many people that read Save the Cat Writes a Story, or writes a book. I keep saying it wrong, but you know what I'm talking about. So many people, I heard them say after they read that, they realized their character wasn't wanting anything. And I'm like, that's like the whole point of the book. Yeah. Myself included. When I first started writing, I was so focused on the premise and like the cool things I wanted to happen in the book, that, I mean, that's really the biggest issue with my first book I ever wrote, is there's no wants at all. Like, none. Yeah. It's just a bunch of people living their lives, kissing, dancing, you know. Some stuff happens, but you know, who cares? So I think that's a huge like thing that people miss. And I think the way he explains it is really, really helpful. And those one little like sentence digestible sort of things. Another thing that he talked about, and I want to get your guys' opinion on this. I feel like you guys would probably agree. But he says, what you choose to write about is far more important than any decision you make about how you write about it. Which I think kind of goes along with what we were saying, is like, it doesn't matter about the world building. It doesn't matter about the prose if what you're writing about sucks.
Was this in the premise section? Is that what this is?
Yeah. So yeah. It's on page 17, actually.
Okay. Gotcha.
So he's saying, and the reason I thought this was really important, also though had me a little shook, because I'm trying to think about like, is what I'm writing about, like, who cares? You know, like, I don't know. So he's just saying that like, that's more important, you know, than how you write it. And the reason why I think this was good though, is I watch a lot of, I don't know if you guys watch him, Roberto Blake. He talks a lot about like making content and, you know, stuff like that. And he always says, it doesn't matter about your camera or your microphone or any of that shit. If what your video is about is stupid, it doesn't matter. Like, who cares? Right? You have to have, and you can, if you're producing good content, quality doesn't mean shit. You could be using your phone. You know, it only gets you so far, right? Like if your audio kind of sucks, but what you're giving the viewer is like really something valuable or important, then it doesn't matter about the quality. And so, because you can fix quality, right? And I think that's so true when you're like when you're querying and you're trying to get an agent, because as long as it's not incoherent, if you have an amazing premise, they'll still take it because they can fix it. They can fix the writing. They can't fix the concept and the premise. So I think it's really important to think about what you're choosing to write about. But I don't know, like, because people always tell you, write what you want to write. So I don't know, like, what do you guys think about that?
I mean, he has that section about how to develop your premise. So I think that if you love your premise, but you're willing to evolve it, I think that's really what matters, is that he's saying, like, you know, what you choose to write about, but then he tells you how to take that idea and either work with it or it's not going to work. So I think that if you love it, he can kind of show you how to make it work.
Yeah, I actually have a quote from that where he says the first technique for finding the gold in an idea is time, though. He says you have to like, you can't just like come up with a premise and then start writing it the next day, because you're not going to get that important stuff in there, right? Like he says that you need to, he said he's not talking about hours or even days. He's talking like weeks. Like I'm like that. Like I do not feel right. Like I've been thinking about certain concepts for books that I haven't even started on that I thought of years, like a year ago, 2 years ago. Khaleesi. So, he's saying that basically you have to let it marinate, those sort of concepts as well.
Yeah. What do you think, Lindsay?
I agree with you guys. I don't really have anything like new to add. So like, I think you guys got it covered. That's a very like broad statement though, like that he made, and it's very hard to unpack because, like you said, I can think of a whole bunch of situations where maybe that's not the case, but
yeah,
I also do.
Yeah.
Because I agree with the whole like, you should write what you love still, because if you're not, even if you have a great idea, you could have an amazing premise, but if you don't like writing it, it's not gonna work. Like you're gonna be miserable and you're not gonna want to write it ever. So like you still have to love what you're writing.
Yeah.
I think really the emphasis is just more on don't just develop your writing skills, but your ideas, right? Like work on making your ideas complex and interesting and different.
And he shows you how to do that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm thinking of like ones where I'm like, man, the concept's kind of dumb, but I think that's also relative,
Yeah.
So it's like, what? Because again, that's maybe him talking from like a literary, perspective, like high literature, like the concept. But I think it doesn't necessarily have to be like mind blowing. I just think it has to be interesting, not done, or relatable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because like again, if we're going back to like my Hangover example, like that's not the most genius concept, but it's something that everyone can relate to at the same time, right? Like this, I mean, on a much less exaggerated level, but it's an experience that everyone can kind of like connect with, that no one's really ever like kind of explored on that way. And then of course, and then how they wrote it is what made it good, but which is also like debatable because I don't like that movie, but so I don't know why The Hangover is the one that I keep going with. I have lots of examples, but that's the one that
it's Laura's favorite. Don't let her lie to you.
It's not even a movie I like. So, but I think of a lot of YA. When I was reading this, I was thinking about a lot of YA books that don't do this, that have been commercially successful. And again, we're asking, what do we consider successful? Is it commercial success? Is it, like critical success, or is it just it got published success, right? So I think that really depends as well. Yeah. I'm trying to see what people are saying.
So White Rabbit Mix said, how would you compare that to people who say that multiple people can have the same premise, but one can be better than the other because of execution?
I think that for me, I think what he's saying is how you write it still matters. It's just secondary to the premise. So if you both have that really cool premise, but you wrote it better, well, then that's going to be more successful.
Mm-hmm. I think too, with that statement, I think it has to be like talked about too in like the context in which he's using it, which is that he's talking about a flawed premise in general. If your premise is flawed, it doesn't matter how good your characters are, how good your plot is, it's not going to work. And that's that's what he means by that quote.
Yeah.
Like you can totally make your own spin on a Jane Austen retelling. So yeah, I think that's, I don't know.
I guess it's hard though to know, like, how do you know your premise is flawed?
Well, he kind of goes through that a little bit.
But isn't his explanation like his opinion of what the flawed premise?
I mean, his opinion of what would make it flawed, aka it wouldn't be good, in his opinion. Yes. So that's the thing, is like that's the thing about writing craft books. There's no definitive way. They're all technically someone's just opinion of what makes it.
Right, but he's not presenting his ideas as his opinion.
He's saying that if you don't have a premise that'll give you the structure for the rest of the story, then it's flawed. If it's only going to give you 2 or 3 lines, that's flawed. But it's a premise that needs to carry an entire story. And if it can do that, then it's good. And then you can start developing further. I think that's what he means.
Yeah. I guess it's like
a way to look at it, though.
A problem I have is I can come up with so many premises, I cannot come up with plots. Right? Like, so there's a difference between a premise and a plot.
Yeah.
And I have like 500 what I think are amazing premises. Can I get a plot in there? Still working on that. You know, like it's that character want. What is the want? What is the drive of the story in that premise? And mine are always so generic.
Well, here's what you do. If you have a bunch of premises, you do what Lindsay does, and you just take a couple of them and you shove them together and make them into a story.
I don't come up with. I have a really hard time coming up with plot, like period. Just like even like what it could be. I'm just like, oh, I should write a book about a person who like lives in this scenario. But it's just like, okay, but who cares? Like, it's a cool, like, you know, but like, who cares? I don't know. I need a book that like tells me how to come up with a plot.
I'm sure there is one out there.
So, but that may just be a flaw in my creativity. And I don't know if there's any fixing for that.
I mean, plenty of people like slice of life novels.
I mean, is that true though? Like, can you think of a successful slice of life novel?
I'm not so good.
Literary fiction stuff. That's about it.
Yeah,
it's popular in like kids lit.
Yeah, I would say that literary fiction definitely, because you're not focusing on the plot. It's more characters. Which, by the way, his chapter on symbols, my God, it was just so. It was a little like rote. It was a little, I don't know. Like if anyone's ever taken one literature course, you understand symbols. You understand. Like I didn't feel like he was bringing anything sort of nuanced, different, interesting. That chapter was horrible to me.
I just want to let you know really quick, popular slice of life novels on Goodreads. The first 5 make no sense. Fault in Our Stars, Fangirl, Perks of Being a Wallflower, Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, and Eleanor and Park.
Maybe Perks, but that's still kind of.
I would say maybe Eleanor and Park.
I haven't read that, so I don't know.
I would not say Fangirl. I guess kind of a slice of life too.
Huh.
So I hate to say this because I just want to premise it by saying love her books. But when I was reading it, I kept thinking a lot about Becky Albertalli's books because I feel like most of them do not follow any of his advice. But at the same time, the one that the most doesn't follow it is the one I'm having the hardest time getting through. So, you know,
here's what I'll say is that when I was reading Fangirl, I do remember thinking, "Here's the climax." Oh no, it's not. Here's the climax.
Oh my God, that was
the climax. Really... No, it's not.
But that just proves that you, at the same time, but that was a wildly successful book. And I always, I don't want to make this sound bad, because I actually did kind of like it. But if we're talking about the writing of it, I just didn't think it was structured well. The same thing as you, is I kept thinking, this is the climax, this is the end, and then it would just keep going. And I'm like, when is this going to end? And it's not because I didn't like it, but I felt like I went through all of the ranges of how the story is supposed to go. And then it's like when someone's telling you a story and you think like that's the end, and then they continue to talk for 15 minutes and you're like, where are you going to go with this? We've already like gone through everything. So I felt like that was poorly written structurally, but people really liked it because it was relatable. Right? She wrote about all the girls that are reading those kinds of books and they hadn't read that book before. So I feel like that's kind of important, like to have something that people can relate to is just as important as like but yeah, I don't know if I would, I guess that's slice of life.
Well, another one on the list was The Great Gatsby.
But that's like high literary. Also, I don't know that. I mean, I guess what are we defining as slice of life? Is that there's what you want?
Yeah.
So you can have a good premise apparently, and nothing happens in the book.
You know what? If we're thinking about Perks of Being a Wallflower, because that is literally my #1 favorite book of all time, and so if we're gonna think about that in terms of slice of life, which I've never thought of it like that, but I guess really if you thought about it, it is. But I think the reason why that one's also successful is it was for me in high school. I'm old. Okay, that book came out when I was in high school, and it was the first time, even though I wasn't a young boy, I don't want to spoil anything, that went through some of the things he went through. Okay. It felt like the first time someone was writing a book about me and my friends.
Yeah.
It was the first time that I saw myself in fiction and I related. I related to what it felt like to be in high school, what it felt like to feel different, what it felt like to be friends with people who were into different kinds of things and they weren't the jocks and they weren't the cheerleaders, and that sort of isolation and that wanting to be and also Charlie's budding feelings for Sam and things like that. Like, it just was so emotional for me. Like, that's what made it good. So it didn't matter what the plot was. So
you like slice of life novels is what I'm hearing.
I think I do because I'm an emotional reader. Like, I've said this before, like, I don't care about plot that much. Plot is so secondary to me. Everything I like story-wise has to do with emotion. I have to have the emotional connection. And that's why it takes a while for me to get into books, because I can't get emotionally connected to people right away. So I usually don't know if I like a book yet until I'm like 25% in, because before that I don't really care. I'm not. And then at 25% I still don't care about the characters, then I usually don't finish it. So yeah, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with slice of life, but I think that if you're not going to do that really heavy want, desire, everything else has to be
perfect,
really good. And I don't mean necessarily stylistic in writing, because I mean, Perks of Being a Wallflower is pretty simplistic writing. I wouldn't say it's super sophisticated or literary in any sort of way. A lot of times it's just tapping into something emotionally that other people haven't yet. And I think that's why Fangirl was. And I think that's kind of why Simon, right, was really popular. It came out at a time when there wasn't a lot of books like that were really tapping into that. Well, maybe they were there that just hadn't been published yet, if you know what I mean. So, yeah.
Anything else you liked?
I'm trying to see. What are some things you really like about it, Lindsay?
Okay, well,
I think
just broadly, think myself or anything like this, but I do have a 10 craft book review and rate coming out soon, and out of all 10 that I read, this is probably the most, I think, in-depth, complex one that I've read. And am I getting an echo? Is that just me?
I can kind of hear it.
Maybe a little bit, but it's not that bad.
I don't know. Okay, sorry. But it's just very complex, and I like that. It feels, like Laura said, it feels like you're taking a college course on how to write literature, rather than just like the basic, early stages of learning how to write a book. So at least that's how I felt, and I really appreciated that. I think this one goes a lot more in depth in your plot and your character development, and the wants, the desires, the morality, the symbols, and so I think that was good, because I was seeing some things in here that I hadn't thought of before, and while reading any of the other craft books, or that I hadn't even thought of myself. So I really appreciate this book for that, because I feel like it took my writing from being okay to being good. And yeah. I really appreciate that, because it didn't teach me how to write. It taught me how to be a better writer. So I don't know if this is necessarily like a book I would recommend like a newbie or really anybody. Maybe if you can't do the but I mean, it's thick, it's dense, it's intense, and it's very like 4.0 instead of 101.
Yeah.
So that's why I love it.
I actually think that's a really good point you make, that it is enhancing things that you should already kind of inherently know how to do and get there. So that's helping you sort of level up.
Yeah.
Right. It's leveling up your writing. I am curious though, because you said you like the sort of morality aspect of it. Not that I'm against morality in books. I like I said, I think all stories are inherently dealing with morals. But I'm just curious what you think about this idea. Because I actually was thinking about your writing because you like this. I was just thinking about this. Like, so for example, when he says that like your main character should be behaving immorally and should be hurting people. And then I think about your little witch book and I'm like, how is she hurting people? How is she behaving immorally in a way that is hurting other people? And by the end of the book, she's going to learn how to treat people better. Like, do you feel like your book is doing that?
My book did, specifically because when I read this book when I wrote my YA book, and I did not have that in there. And I wasn't even sure if I liked that idea, because I'm like you, I could think of some examples where that isn't necessary. Your main character doesn't have to be hurting someone else. I mean, look at Harry Potter. That's like argumentally like the best book of all time. And, you know, that Harry's perfect. The entire series almost. So I don't think it's like a 100% always has to be, but I wanted to try it. So I did try it with my middle grade witch book. The main character is fat and she's upset about that. Her mom's the comp title is like dumpling. So her mom's a pageant star and everyone expects her to win the pageant. And she's fat and she's angry because she's, you know, not being treated right in the world. So she takes it out on other people. And so in the beginning, she's mean to her mom. And over the course of the story, she realizes, well, I'm not actually mad at mom. So like that,
right.
But like, it doesn't have to be like that. And when I was talking about morality, I was actually talking about like the, what was it? The first couple steps, like the moral argument or something. Now I gotta find it. See if I can.
I think that the thing with morals, though, is that everyone's morals are different. So, like, I think that, like, treating someone, in defense of the book, treating someone, like, badly because of your morals, like you said, could be something simple like, oh, I'm just being mean to someone, rather than, like, I'm cheating on my husband, which comes up in the book.
And maybe that was the issue I was having, but
it doesn't have to be, like, a huge thing.
Yeah.
But, Lindsay, go on.
Okay, I'm sorry. I went actually, like, what was it? The moral weakness and then the character weakness.
Yeah.
I can't find the page, but that's what I was talking about. I really liked that part. That I don't know.
I guess like maybe this is getting hung up on like what we mean by morality. Maybe that's the issue you're having. Because what I would say is like you saying, and this is the issue I have, because my character is actually doing something sort of similar. She's hung up in her own issues, and so it makes her kind of like, my book deals a lot with anger. I feel like not enough YA books deal with anger, and I was such an angry teen. So like that's kind of like a big focus on mine, is like my character's really angry about things. That's how she's sort of dealing with what things that have happened to her. And so I feel like, you know, that does come out in like being mean to the parents, being mean to other people, pushing people away, that kind of stuff. To me, that's not immoral though, right? Like your character being mean to her mom, I don't know, like to me, that's not what people being immoral. Like, and again, I think it comes down to what is the definition of immoral, because the reason why I wasn't thinking that is, to me, that's more psychological. And he says that psychological needs are different than moral, right? Like your psychological is different than your moral problems. And to me, I wasn't seeing, like, to me, immoral is like big ones, like cheating on people, murdering people, like maybe not that extreme, but you know what I'm trying to say, hurting. But I guess if we're thinking about hurting people as being immoral, then maybe, yeah, the being mean and pushing people away and stuff like that could be seen as
I say, I think that comes down to like your own morals as a writer, or at least your character's morals,
or how you think about morality. Because I just don't see that as immoral. I would just see that as a psychological issue rather than morality. Yeah, but yeah, I guess a lot of people agree that like immoral is hurting people. I guess I just never thought about it like that.
I think it's fine though, because I think that you can interpret it however you want, and as long as it's executed well, like you're good.
Well, I think if I interpret it the way you're interpreting it, then my book does have that, right? So then maybe you're right. Maybe I was just getting too hung up on like, to me, immoral equals illegal, right? In a lot of ways. I mean, I guess not cheating. Cheating's not illegal, but you know what I'm trying to say. Like,
Bad.
very like, I think of hurting people. I don't think of like being a bitch. You know,
that goes to show what Laura's morals are.
A lot about myself. Okay, I don't see that as hurting people though. Like I think hurting people on like a much stronger level.
But being an asshole or a bitch can hurt people deeply.
I guess, yeah.
Laura's gonna start rethinking her.
No, I disagree. I'm just thinking about this differently for the first time, so I'm just kind of like trying to
in Lindsay's book, which I've read. She is mean to her mom, and like that, it affects their entire relationship.
Yeah.
So, like, if you think about it, like, oh, Laura just got.
I think my book does do it then.
Like, look at that.
This is why we have these book chats. And this is exactly why, because this is honestly though, is exactly why I wanted to do stuff like this, because I need to hear other people's perspectives on the same topic, because I think of them in a certain kind of way. And sometimes I need someone else's way of thinking about it to come at it from a different direction. Because then I 100% think my book is doing that, because a big part of my book is something happened to my main character. And now because of that, she had this really strong relationship with her father, and it's completely like broken. And he keeps trying to reestablish it, and she just gets angry with him, and it's very hurtful to him. And I guess, you know, in a sense, she is like hurting him, because she's you know, pushing him away and not like having that relationship that they used to have, and she doesn't want it, and she's really mean to him when he tries to do it.
Yeah, and that's really, again, that's immoral to some people, and like it depends.
Yeah. I guess I was just thinking about morality very differently.
Like Victoria Reed said, that she thinks he used a lot of dramatic examples like cheating to explain his point, but it doesn't need to be as in your face. Which I think he was going to an extreme to be like, these are immoral things, but I don't think it means like your character. Lindsay's character doesn't go around murdering people.
Yeah. I was thinking like, poor little, I can't imagine Lindsay's little witch doing anything to hurt people. She's like going around like stealing from her neighbors and like killing the neighbor's cat and stuff.
But Lindsay's character does go through the evolution, which, not to like spoiler, I guess, or much about Lindsay, but she goes through the evolution because at first, like Lindsay said, she is angry and she does lash out, and then like by the end, she's like just this sassy little girl. I love her. So she goes through that, like that moral change.
Yeah.
Like being angry at the world, being angry at her mom, to like being like.
And I personally feel like that really helped me develop the character arc, because she can go from being this angry girl that lashes out to where that's not, she changes that. She's no longer doing that kind of stuff. I think one of the examples, actually from Casablanca, like we were talking about, the weaknesses in there where the main character is cynical, disillusioned, reactive, and selfish. So like in his version of moral, in his definition of moral, those can be the weaknesses for that.
Oh, so what you mean is I probably should have read more of the examples.
Here's what I'll say about the examples though, is I read them, and I don't know if it's because he's an older man or because this was published in 2007. The examples, so many of them, I was just like, this is like, most people will not know these examples.
That's why I didn't read a lot of them. I was like, I haven't seen this. I don't care about this example.
Like, I haven't even heard of some of them.
He talks about Tootsie so much.
Oh my god, dude! His like boner for Tootsie was like too much for me.
I was just like,
not even that great of a movie. So I'm just.
I just don't understand it. Like, look, I barely know what that movie is. People younger than me going into reading this book will have no fucking clue what that movie is. I barely know what it is.
I mean, even if you don't know the examples, like you can still read it to get what he's saying, but if you don't know the story, it only gives you so much. Like the only one that made any sense to me was like the Star Wars, and I was like, okay, I can understand this.
There was one that he in particular he used that I was like, dude, you need to have read this or seen this to understand this example, which he then uses it again later and gives you more of the plot. But like at the earlier point, I was like, I have literally no idea what he means by this because I've never seen it.
But I think his choice of books also speaks to what I was saying, or movies, speaks to what I was saying, that he's thinking of literary with a capital L, because those are all critically
literary
movies, you know? What?
I said, is Tootsie really literary?
Oh, yeah, it was a critically acclaimed at the time that it came out. It was considered. Aaron, you love Tootsie, don't you? The movie Tootsie where he dresses up like a woman.
Yes, it's a great
Aaron's always telling me, I can't believe you've never seen Tootsie.
I never even heard about it when I first read this. Yeah.
It's a very, like, Aaron and I are like super into film, and so it's like considered one of those like top of all time.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I like what Caitlin said though. I've never seen Tootsie. Reading this book, I feel like I've watched it now.
That kind of happened to me with Save the Cat Writes a Novel too, because some of the examples were things I hadn't read before. And I was just like, I'll just read this. I don't care. And then I was like, okay, now I'm definitely never reading these books because
hers were like straight up. Hers were like straight up. Here's everything that happens in it. He also talked about like The Godfather a lot, which I feel like that is more like that one. I feel like a lot of people know. So that one was like more.
I've never seen that either. So
a lot of people talk about it.
Can't relate.
He talks about the Philadelphia story. Never even heard of it.
Yeah, some of them I've never heard. He like talked about like a German film once, and I'm like, whoa, we are really getting obscure here.
He talks about the Cherry Orchard, which I'll say I had never heard of, but it made me want to read. But then he spoils it. I was like, not reading it now.
Spoilers don't bother me. I can still enjoy things if it's been spoiled.
It's Chekhov though, so I don't know if I would enjoy it to begin with. I think the only enjoyment I would get out of it is the story.
He does. Okay, so Victoria mentioned like he talks about Gilgamesh, and this is again where I felt like this was a college course textbook, because he also brings up Aristotle's Poetics. He's like, I'm going to assume that all of you have read Aristotle's Poetics. And I'm like,
oh yeah, he did say that, and I was like,
assuming this, bro. I mean, I've read Aristotle's Poetics, but I read it in my master's program for literature. So it's like I didn't read it before then. So like you're assuming that everyone is at a master's level of English literature when they're reading this book. Like most writers are not. They don't know that. And to be honest, I've read Poetics, and I would just say to that, you know, I don't think you need to read it. I think that Poetics was the first, because it was written by Aristotle, so it was written a long time ago, was the first time that like the fundamentals of storytelling were like written down. But so many people inherently knew that moving forward, that you know what Aristotle said without having to read it. But the fact that that's what he's referring to, and he's bringing up Gilgamesh and Aristotle's Poetics and all these other things, it's like he's assuming a certain level of reader that makes it come off like this text is unapproachable by people who are not on that level.
Yeah.
well,
it's not written for John Q. public. And that's problematic for me, right? You want again, it's like, who is your audience, and who you want people to be able to get something out of this. And if you're setting a bar where you feel like people need to be at a certain level to understand your text, then you're leaving out a lot of people who could still get a lot from it if you just wrote it in a different way.
Here's what I'll say is that Damien got his master's he went to like a school that taught creative writing. He has his master's in creative writing. This is one of the books they had to read in class. What?
Interesting.
He said they all complained about it. Everyone in his class hated it. He said it was
I'm telling you, there is really, really good stuff in here, but I'm telling you, the tone is what's going to make everyone.
Well, he said, I think he said that if someone was like a douche, they called it like pulling a Truby.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Tone means everything. It means everything. You're going to lose your audience. You're going to lose it. Like if you come off that way.
It very much reads like it was meant for college kids. Like, and
college kids don't want to read stuff like that either.
Yeah.
Only pretentious, pedantic academics want to read stuff like that.
I'm surprised you didn't like it, Laura.
I am not. I'm a PhD dropout because I can't write stuff like that. My stuff is written to where anyone on the street could pick it up and read it, and all of my like professors and stuff are like, no, you need to write it to where, you know, you need to be a gatekeeper of knowledge, and I don't want to be a gatekeeper of knowledge.
I think here's the thing. Overall, I think I would have liked it a lot more if he just changed his approach of how he was saying it.
Agree. 100%.
Because I think that, like I said, you can pull out nuggets of good information, but in this, it's like you had to pull out nuggets through like a cloud of douche, and I didn't like having to do that. It really is just off-putting to me. Like, I've read lots of good craft books where they're just like, they're nice, and like I've read one where she'll straight up tell you, like, if you're doing it this way, it's bad, but she doesn't say it like he does, where I feel like he's kind of trying to make you feel stupid in a way, which I don't like.
Yep.
So.
Agree.
But again, I think that every craft book that you read, no matter how bad it is or how much you don't like connect with it, you can always pull something good out of it, which is why I recommend reading craft books and self-help books.
I think no matter what, you should be reading as many craft books as possible. Like, even though this is my favorite, I would never say this is the only craft book you ever need to read and you're good. Read widely, read everything you can get your hands on. And like someone said in the comments earlier, just pull things from every book that you like that fit your style and go for it. Like that's the most important thing.
It's kind of like artists, right? All artists have a style, and they create that style by pulling things that they like from other things. So your writing is a style of all the things you pulled out of craft books that you like. And I think that there are people who don't read craft books and can write, but I think that it'll help. Like Marissa Meyer, remember Laura, she said in one of the book signings we went to that she has read like tons of craft books. And look, she's like a New York Times bestselling author. So, and I don't think she lives by every single thing she reads. It's about pulling out what really works for you.
I think that we often, I mean, if we're going to be really honest, like, I think that the more educated you are in your craft, the better. And it doesn't have to be a formal education. It doesn't have to mean a degree. It means knowing your field, knowing your craft. And I think, yes, you can be successful without it, but that's more luck. That's more of an outlier. Even like in acting, like, yes, there are people who never acted. They were plucked from obscurity and became a star. But usually the people that have become really good actors and actresses, they took acting courses and they have acting coaches, and they're always learning and they're always doing it in their own way. It doesn't mean they have a degree in it per se, but they're always learning and not just living off, you know, their own inherent goodness. So yeah, I would never not recommend the book. If I was to recommend this book to other people, though, I would say some caveats, you know, like, look, just buckle in, know that dude's a douche, but
it might take you a while to read it. It's pretty dense, so don't go in expecting this to be a weekend read.
No, it took me months, y'all. Like, my plan was to read a craft book a month and review it. And this was my second book, and I've been reading it for like 9 months or something. Like, it just was like so heavy for me to get into that I was just like, ugh.
I wrote, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go, you.
I was going to say, when you're talking about dense, I wrote like a list of my pros and my cons, just like overall of the book. And the cons were, feels very 401, not 101, making it inaccessible, dense, pretentious as hell, and very anti-pantser.
Yes,
you haven't touched one yet. So if you guys want to talk about that,
you can go ahead, because we were talking about this before we went live. So Lindsay, you can talk about it if you want.
Oh, it's very anti-pantser.
Because you're. Sorry,
it's very with brainstorming and outlining. Sorry, I thought I heard it echo again. I'm messing up here.
No, you're good.
But yeah, it's very, very heavy with brainstorming, outlining. This is an outlining book. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It's a brainstorming and outlining book. And again, that pretentious tone is very much, it's my way or the highway. You have to outline, and if you don't outline, you are going to be doing tons of rewriting because it's wrong. So it's very anti-pantser.
Well, joke's on him, because even with planning, I do tons of rewriting. So.
Right. Guess what, John? I'm on draft 8 of the book you helped me write.
I mean, I feel like that should be a whole different like conversation or like video, but I think while yes, it's like anti-pantsing, I also just think pantsing actually doesn't exist. I think people who say they're pantsers aren't real pantsers. I think you just outline in a different
hot take.
I know, that's a hot take for me. I'm gonna do an author to confession video on that. I just think that you do it in a different order, right? Like you free write first and then you make sense of that. I don't think that anyone truly pantses anything.
Well, I think that is pantsing, though, is the free writing the first draft is pantsing. I don't think that anyone could be...
I don't know that pantsing is defined by what your first draft is.
I don't think it's possible for someone to pants editing. I don't think that's possible.
But I feel like everyone ultimately creates an outline and goes by structure. No one just, beautiful minds like this amazing prose that is never put through outline and structure.
I think that as a whole, though, no craft book I've written. I mean, written. No craft book I've read.
Spoiler alert: Kevin is John Truby.
Shut up. No craft book I've read encourages pantsing. They're all very structured, at least the ones I've read.
Yeah, I think a lot of them are coming in with the idea that you've already word vomited all your ideas anyway, right? Like, don't we all sort of do that? I don't know.
I mean, there are some people who are really hardcore planners where, like, they'll do like a page and a half per chapter of planning.
But that's what I think. I think everyone is just a different level of plotter.
Lindsay?
I think, I mean, like, I'm in a way I'm with Laura because I think that everyone, you have to add structure at some point. I think plotters just do it earlier than pantsers. Pantsers vomit it out, they pants the novel, and then once they have that, then they're like, okay, now I need to revise and put some structure in it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the difference. I mean, you're still essentially doing the same thing, you're just doing it at different times.
Exactly. And I'll be honest, like, I plot my first draft, but it's still a freaking pantser word vomit. It is garbage. Right? Because I don't hardcore like plot like all the way down like to the minutia of every like dialogue and everything. But again, I just think everyone's doing it at different levels, how much they're doing it. But I wouldn't, you know what I mean? Like,
it's a spectrum.
Exactly.
It's a spectrum. You're on there somewhere.
Laura's a percolator.
Oh, things have to marinate for me for a long time. Kevin is a traveling John Truby.
No, I just saw that.
For instance, like for plotters versus pantsers, like George R. R. Martin, I watched an interview with him where he talked about how he calls himself like you're a gardener or an architect. Mm-hmm. And he sees he's a gardener because he puts his ideas down and then like he has no idea where they're going when he writes. But that's also why he got in this huge mess that's taken him like 12 years to write a book.
Yes.
He calls it like the mirror needs knot because he doesn't know how to fix the plot that he wove together. Like he's said this multiple times. He has literally no idea how to fix it, and that's why it's taking so long. So
should have read this.
He started his book before the book.
So that's what I'm saying is like, while this isn't for someone who considers themselves a pantser, rather than that, I just don't think that this is ready. That you should read this for the word vomit pantser part of your journey. Once you're ready to clean it up, get some structure to it, that's when you could use this book, I feel like. Or so.
I just want to say, I mean, it's a little off topic, I guess, now, but I don't understand people who can just word vomit their first draft without any structure, because I've tried doing that. Revision was the worst thing I've ever done. I basically had to rewrite the whole book. It was awful. So I don't understand how people can do that. Props to you.
Yeah, and I guess it's Hila in the chat. She said, Brandon Sanderson said it well. Some people front load the planning and some do it in revision. I can't do it all in revision because it's overwhelming. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
I do it a little bit in revision because my revisions, like my versions 2 and 3, always involve brand new scenes, brand new things, like completely. So I definitely am not the plotter where like I literally have everything figured out. But if I do it with nothing figured out, it overwhelms me. Like I just can't even go there. Like it's too much work. It's too scary for me. So again, I think it's just how people approach things, you know. I did want to talk about though, because I was thinking about it when Lindsay mentioned like her character, her little witch character who's like, you know, doing mean stuff, and then her character arc sort of, you know, resolves at the end, because he said something about endings that I found. I wrote the page number down, so let me get it, because this was like a head scratcher for me. And maybe I just need someone to like womansplain, mansplain, whatever, what he's saying about endings, because he says it on page 420.
Blaze up.
Yeah, I wish. He says, where is he? Okay, so he has this little section on like the never-ending story, right? And like how what you want, and I'm just like, okay. But he like says there's a few elements to create the infinite story, and then he basically like has you do all these shashas at the end. He tells you to do all these weird things at the end of the book to like give a surprising character change. Like these are all the things you're told not to do at the end of books. Like you don't put new information. You don't like, it's the same thing with like any kind of writing. Like you don't give new information. You don't like flip things up. Like, I don't know. I'm wondering what you guys thought about that. Where he's basically saying like to like, I don't know.
The reveal at the end is all you're talking about?
The what?
Like the big reveal at the end?
Well, he's saying on the bottom of page 420, where he's saying, like, here are just a few of the elements you can include to create an infinite story tapestry, right? At the end of your book. So that, because he says earlier, I underlined it, because he's talking about, like, before we consider good techniques, right? Like, let's do the reverse and tell you all the ways that you can have, like, a bad ending. And bad endings are premature, arbitrary, and closed. So he doesn't like things wrapped up at the end. He doesn't think your endings of books should be wrapped up at the end. He says the most common false ending is the closed ending. The hero accomplishes his goal, gains a simple self-revelation, and exists in a new equilibrium where everything is calm. Like I feel like that's how all books end, unless they're a series. And even then, I feel like
even then, you're told when trying to like sell a book that it should wrap up in case it doesn't.
Right. And he says all three of these structural elements give the audience a sense that the story is complete and that the system has come to rest. Like, don't you want people to feel like your story is complete at the end? And so then he gives you ways to make it feel not complete at the end, right? On the bottom of 420, he says the hero fails to achieve his desire. The other characters come up with new desires, giving a surprising character change to an opponent. Place a tremendous number of details in the background of the story world that on later viewing move to the foreground. Add elements of texture, create a relationship between the story. I do see some of these in some endings of stuff, but make the moral argument ambiguous. I don't know.
Some of the things to me read like, this is how you should set up a sequel. And
yeah, like
I don't.
But he's not talking about that kind of stuff.
I know.
You know, Casablanca, Tootsie, like, I don't, maybe I'm like being too literal with what he's saying. I don't know. I didn't like that though.
There are some of them that I just didn't really understand.
Like that felt more literary to me, adult literary, right? Because when you think about literary text, like the stuff that you read in your literature courses, they are ambiguous at the end. There is no wrapping up. There is no whatever. But I feel like when you're talking about commercial fiction, when you're talking about genre fiction, agents, publishers, they don't want ambiguous endings. They don't want new information being dropped unless it's going to be a series where you tie up this story, but you set up a new one.
Yeah.
To be developed later.
Yeah. I mean, unless I'm not understanding it either. It was a little confusing, yeah.
Victoria says, I thought it was more you need a balance, that the world doesn't end and there's still life that keeps going. I agree with that. So, like, yeah. But I feel like what he's saying is some of the ways in which he's saying to do it, I feel like are a problem.
I think that is actually an issue that agents say they have with books, is that there is no ending. And it's like, this is kind of a strange advice to give when so many agents are like, your story needs to wrap up. He's kind of saying not to, which is confusing.
Or not to not wrap up, but to not make it so. Kind of like what Victoria said, that like life is still going on. This character's still going to have issues. There's still things to work on. There's still stuff that's going to happen. I don't know, but the way he says it, or the way he advises to do it, I don't know, just came off like that it can be interpreted.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying maybe I'm interpreting it wrong. I don't know.
The only one that I find confusing of the three that like the false endings are like the way you shouldn't end your story. Premature, I think that makes sense because like you don't want an ending that's like, you know, rushed.
Right.
Arbitrary is like, you know, kind of like, okay, who cares? Big deal. I'll forget this as soon as I close the book type ending. But I'm with you on the closed. I even reread that section, and basically he wants you to feel like the equilibrium achieved at the end is temporary, and that there should still be a desire. And I agree with Kevin. It feels like that's more of like a sequel type thing.
Yeah.
Or like even like that would be great for like horror where you want to be unsettled.
Yeah.
But
I love those endings in horror, by the way. Yeah. Like I love those endings in horrors where it's like, Shasha, the ghost is still there or whatever. Love that.
Or like The Sixth Sense, like that reveal at the end. That's beautiful. But I agree. It's not going to work for every book.
Well, what Writing in Beats said, think of Harry Potter first book ends, but he returns to keep learning magic. That doesn't really count because that's, again, it's a series. So like you expect it to end in a way that's going to keep moving things on. And at the end of the first book, you don't, if I remember correctly, there is no like over feeling of like more danger. It's just like he's gonna come back next year. It's like that's not really the same, I feel like, than what Truby is saying.
Yeah, he's saying that like you don't want everything complete. You want exactly like you were saying, like you want it to feel like this is tenuous. And I feel like that kind of goes without saying, unless your character dies at the end. There's always going to have desires. Like things are the equilibrium is always going to be, but I don't think we need to like put new elements in at the end to explicitly show readers, don't think their life is perfect forever.
Unless it's guaranteed to be a series where you know there's going to be a sequel, which Harry Potter did, so it doesn't really count here.
Yeah, I mean, she wrote it as a sequel.
She wrote it to have a series, so of course at the end there's going to be something that ties into the next book. But standalone books should not end with maybe there'll be a sequel.
I mean, yes, Harry Potter could have ended like that, Writing in Beats, but
she knew it wasn't.
Intended it like that. She intended it to always be a sequel, and so her ending is always going to have that opening for more. So unless you're intending, and again, even if you are intending it to be a series, you usually don't want the story to be open-ended at the end either, though. You want that part to be closed, but you're setting up something new for the next.
I'll tell you right now.
Officially published, you better.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Is like I think he's again talking about literary with a capital L or capital F, you know, as in like, yeah, when you're talking about like Scarlet Letter, it's a very ambiguous ending. Like it's not an equilibrium has not been developed. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about commercial, you know, essentially commercial fiction and writing and publishing. People don't want that.
No.
And
I have had rejections from editors and agents who do not want an open, like stuff like that. They don't want things like that. They want the story to be self-contained without opening up something at the end. Like, and is blah 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 still alive? And then it ends. Like they don't want that.
Yeah.
They want it to be self-contained, where it's not setting up for sequel in case it doesn't get one. Because especially in traditional publishing, I have had friends who sold a trilogy. The first two books got published, and then the third one they were like, we don't want to publish it anymore.
Yeah.
So
I think that this ending section is the perfect example of things that you can kind of just skip over.
Yeah.
They don't apply.
Speaking of things that I was like, oh, do we lose Kevin? Wait, he's back.
He was like, I disagree.
Wait, did Laura just disappear?
Oh.
That was weird.
All right. Well, we should a little shuffle there. Kevin's now on the bottom. He's the worst. So
I don't know what happened.
Another thing that I was curious about, if we're talking about that, was also his ideas on the first line. Okay. So he talks about this on page 387. He says, the first line is the broadest statement of the story and frames what the story will be about. And I do think that we see examples of this 100%, but I think those are more so in, again, literary with a capital L, because more so you want the first line to be interesting and bring people in, you know? And so I feel like I don't agree that the first sentence should essentially frame what the whole story is about. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I agree with that because I don't know. Like if we're going back to the Harry Potter example, that right, the first line is Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they're perfectly normal. Thank you very much. That doesn't talk about what the story's about at all. And I think
I'm just thinking.
I don't know. I think that the first line should be a hook. I think that within the first page, maybe you should. I mean, I don't know. I think the first sentence is asking a lot. When I've read so many books that don't.
I mean, he gives good examples of ones that do, but again, they're all very literary. Like, it's a certain type of writing, a certain time period also of writing. Where we live in the world of, you know, tweets. You need something that's like gonna grab people in. It's gonna hook them, pull them in. We're not in that sort of world anymore, where I feel like the reader is different and looking for different things. And we're always told that like your first sentence should be interesting. And I think you can do that. Like you can have a first sentence that's interesting and kind of sets up. Because I do feel like somewhat that example, Kev, of Harry Potter is kind of doing what he's saying a little bit. It's just not as obvious.
I don't think it is, in my opinion. I mean, it just.
Well, no, I'm kidding. Lindsay, what do you think, Lindsay?
When was this published, first of all?
2007.
Was it 2007?
Yeah, 2007.
So that feels way more recent than I would have thought.
And maybe that has something to do with it, especially like we're YA writers, right? Like there's so much emphasis on first lines, first paragraphs, first pages.
Yeah.
That in 2007 probably wasn't there because YA, and I don't even think he's writing about YA, like that this book probably isn't about YA, but if we're still applying it, the market, the entire machine of publishing is completely different.
Agreed.
So I don't know. I do agree with like the next lines about like there should be a punch, there should be drama. I really love first lines that like set the tone personally.
Tone I think is way more important.
Yeah. So I would say take that sentence like with a grain of salt because you need to keep in mind the market that you are trying to get your book published through. And yeah.
And that's why I was saying that was like a big issue I was having with reading this is that it does feel really geared towards a certain kind of writing, a certain level of writing, and that can't always apply to both like young adult and middle grade, and then also like genre and stuff like that. It feels very like literary, capital L. Because like I definitely think that the first line should set tone and not story, like what to expect from the story. Especially I think if you're doing like first person, you know, like because then if you're setting up a sentence in first person, it kind of it makes it more of a narrator than internal, like I guess it depends on how you're writing your first person also. Because if it's first person past, then it is kind of narration. I don't know.
I wonder how that works in in movies though. Like
I think well, that was also something because he has that whole section which I just kind of was like, I don't even want to deal with that. Where he's talking about the storyteller. Because I don't understand how that applies to film in any sort of way. And maybe it's just because I'm dumb, but I was like, you know, like some of it I did, but some of it I'm just like, how does that work? I don't know. Some of the stuff at the end, I felt like he really unpacks a lot of stuff in the beginning, and like the last few chapters, like, oh, I forgot to talk about dialogue. Here's a paragraph on dialogue. And I was like, whoa, we need some more. We need some more thoughts on that because you can't just talk. There was one that was like only a paragraph long, and I was like, really, bro? He's like, you know, you should develop that more somewhere else. I'm like, where?
It's funny. I've actually watched interviews with him, and his like number one thing is when he teaches classes, people come up to them, and he's like, or students come up to him, and they're like, "Well, I wrote this awesome dialogue. Like the dialogue was the first thing," and he hates that. That's like his pet peeve. So I wonder if that's why he barely talked about dialogue because they start with dialogue and not story. And so I'm wondering if that's why there's like barely any dialogue in here, because he doesn't want to like.
Yeah, well, speaking of that, he said some weird stuff about dialogue too, but I didn't get a chance to write it down. I'm wondering if I can find it quickly, because he did say something like, he says dialogue, I'm paraphrasing, but he says like, dialogue should not be what you actually would say, which is like the opposite of what they tell you. Like agents and publishers say like, this is not what people would say, right? Like they say that all the time. And he's saying you shouldn't write what people would say. You should write, how does he say it?
Brandon Sanderson actually has a whole video on this, and it's really, really interesting. It's like when you're writing about dialogue, it's like a mix between how we would really talk and how like robots talk. Because how we talk is like circular, there's there's ands, there's commas, and that's not fun to read, and that's going to clog up your prose. So maybe he means like the editing thing, because that's what Brandon was talking about.
I mean, I definitely understand that. I definitely understand like not so literal the way we talk, but the ways in which I find this a lot in books where, and it feels like it's coming from his advice, where you have like these incredibly, and John Green does this a lot, incredibly introspective teen boys. And I'm just like,
yeah.
And that's what he's kind of trying to say is like, don't write how you would actually write, which I get to an extent, because you are writing a story. You're not writing real life, right? It's not a real. So I do think you need to have a balance there. But at the same time, it can't be so freaking unbelievable. And I think that's why a lot of people don't like John Green books, is the characters are so unbelievable. Which again is taste, because lots of people love John Green. So again, that's just a matter of opinion. But for me, I'm really crazy about that, because I grew up in a house full of young boys, and they are not introspective. Okay? And they don't say, like, they don't understand their emotions. They don't say them well. Like most of my friends in high school were boys. Like, it's just not, it's wishful thinking, you know, which I think is fine to an extent, but I still feel like it should feel natural, like an actual, to some extent. And he's saying like, not at all. Don't write how people actually talk. And I'm just like, I don't know. I feel like there needs to be like more of a balance there. I don't know. Oh yeah, I have, dialogue is not real talk. It is highly selective language that sounds like it could be real.
At least he's saying that it still should sound like it could be real.
Yeah, well, but then he follows it up by saying, good dialogue is always more intelligent, wittier, more metaphorical, and better argued than in real life. And I just think that, I don't know, I feel like it depends. And I feel like, yeah, a little bit. But it should feel like it could be real, right? So it's like, it should be wittier. So I agree with that point, but I feel like sometimes when people are trying to do the more intelligent, the wittier, the more metaphorical, they're forgetting that it should also sound like it could be real. And some of it just does not sound like it could be real.
I think that's a revision thing. Like you just go over it and make sure it's working, you know?
Yeah. I definitely think like when I write my own dialogue, the first round of dialogue is so literal what I want people, like, you know what I mean? Like I have to really revise dialogue, and I have to think, how would people actually say this? Because they would never say it so explicit and so like, you know, I think dialogue's hard. I think it's a lot harder than people think it is, for sure.
It's very hard, and especially when you're trying to make all of your prose economic, you know, you can't have huge rambly prose. You got to make every single word count a lot of times. I mean, maybe you can throw in whatever to make it seem like a real teen, you know, stuttering through asking someone to prom or something, but like it's gotta pull its weight, and it's hard. I still work on it, you know?
Yeah. And he does this like metaphor where he talks about dialogue being a symphony, where most writers just write the melody, but you gotta have, but I couldn't follow. I didn't know what he meant. Like I wrote seems convoluted it felt muddy to me. I didn't quite understand. I understand his thought, right? Like that dialogue needs to be doing more than one thing, but I couldn't understand how he was explicating that, like how he was saying to do it. Like, speaks against the design. I don't know. That was too much even for me. I couldn't follow there. So, like, you have to have moral dialogue. You have to have story dialogue, moral dialogue, and then his other third is like this. I did agree with though. I forgot about this. He talks. His third track of the symphony of your dialogue is key words, phrases, taglines, and sounds, repetition, variation, and leitmotif, which I actually agree with because I think some of the best books that really resonate with me and stay with me is where a key like symbol or line or something is repeated throughout and takes on different meaning and actually works with the development of desire and understanding. It's like, okay, he said this one phrase and it meant something very literal and here, but then when we hear it a second time in Act 2, it's taking on a different meaning, and then in Act 3 that it comes up again and it's taking on a different meaning and it's much more loaded. I think that's another level of writing that is the kind of story that stays with people when you're really doing that kind of stuff. So I think that's excellent advice on writing dialogue. The idea of keywords, phrases, repetition, and playing with what those words mean in different contexts. So I think that's excellent.
Yeah.
I think it was the moral dialogue part that I'm just like, I don't know what you mean by this. So that was what I was having a hard time with. Yes, Latrice, I think that's a good point. She said, I've heard that dialogue should not be the same as inner monologue. Real people don't translate all of their inner thoughts straight into how they talk. I think that that's a pitfall that people fall into sometimes, is that dialogue sounds like internal monologue, like inner monologue, and that's not the case. Speaking of, I think that was something else that he says. He does talk about monologues, which I was like, really? I'm trying to think where that was at. That felt very like literary too. Like you know, we're not all writing Hamlet. You know, not everyone needs to have a soliloquy. You know, at the end of this, it feels like SVU. You know, like which is probably my favorite show of all time. But there's always that moment where one character. That's why they get paid the extra $200 because they get this long monologue where they get to say, you know, where they're speaking, where I feel like they're saying like the most obvious shit to basically like if throughout this whole episode you didn't get this from this episode, this is what we want you to get. You know, and he kind of like advocates for that, and I'm like, again, that's a different kind of story. I wonder how many craft books are specific to writing young adult or children's books. I feel like that's why a lot of people resonate with Save the Cat Writes Novels. Even though it wasn't, she is a YA writer, so she did have that in mind when giving advice. I think that's why it felt a lot more accessible to people.
I think there are some.
But I'm wondering if they're like craft specific or if they're more like market specific. If that makes sense.
Well, there's one called Writing Irresistible Kidlit. Laura, you have one. It's called Writing Great Books for Young Adults.
I think I do have that one.
You do.
One of the ones that Aaron got me?
Yeah, that was.
I think I do have that.
I don't know how.
But I thought that was more market, but maybe not. Exactly, Lizdell. I think that's why I resonate with a lot of people, because a lot of people in this community are writing young adults, or like middle grade children's books. And Save the Cat, even though it wasn't geared toward that, she does come from that background, so she was giving those examples, which made it feel more accessible. And I think that's why it became so popular here on AuthorTube, especially.
Writing Irresistible Kidlit, though, is 8 years old, which is still newer than this. At least there's that.
Yeah.
And the other one that you have, Writing Great Books for Young Adults, is from 2009, which is still newer than this. So the thing is that, like, especially YA has changed so much since 2009.
Yeah.
It is so different.
The book you're writing in 2009 will not work now.
No.
I sometimes have a soft spot and miss those books, but yeah. I just want a paranormal book where someone falls in love with the vampire or a ghost.
I would definitely recommend those of you who haven't read Save the Cat doing the Save the Cat writes a novel, as opposed to, because it, especially Kelly, you said you use the beat sheets. Do you use the Save the Cat beat sheets? Because she kind of develops this, writes a novel beat sheets a little more specific to like writing books as opposed to film. And that's what's kind of hard too, is a lot of these craft books are based on people who do film.
Yeah.
Which a lot of the storytelling aspects are the same, but some of the stuff in specifics are not the same.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the beats, what did you guys think of the 22 steps? Like, how did we feel about that?
What page was that on?
Okay, what page is that so I can look at it while I talk?
270 has the full spreadsheet.
Okay.
Let's see here.
So I felt like a lot of them were the exact same.
Yeah, they're very similar.
Yeah, is that it's just there's beefing up in certain places.
Yeah.
I
think that there's a like emphasis on like how the character is woven into the plot here, whereas Save the Cat is just almost more like plot focused a little bit.
100%.
You know?
100%. At the same time, though, like some of the stuff, I guess, and maybe I'm like resistant to it because my book doesn't have these things, and I feel like I don't need to have these things, but maybe I actually do. So I'm being resistant to that because I don't want him to be right because I hate him. I hate his tone. But you know, especially when he's talking about opponent, fake ally opponent, those are the ones I'm having like kind of a hard time because I immediately want to resist it. But then when I look at my book, I'm like, maybe I do actually have those in there, and I just don't realize it. And maybe if I recognize that I do have it, I can turn the volume up on it a little bit, like I was already naturally doing it. I don't know.
But you don't need to have all 22. Like you can still.
Well, doesn't he say though that you do? They just can be in a different order. He says every good story works through the steps in a slightly different order. You must find the order that works best for your unique plot and characters.
I don't know. I feel like I remember something about some of them not, but I don't know. I feel
like something he would say, like, take them or leave them. That doesn't sound like him.
I just one thing I really didn't like is the fake ally opponent. I don't think everything needs that in it.
Yeah, that's why I mean, like, I feel like you don't need all of these.
Yeah, I guess his like definition of opponent was kind of hard for me too, because he's saying that the opponent has to be someone who wants the same thing, and they're like basically going after they have the same want but going about it differently. And I don't know.
I think it was the opponent is the person that keeps the main character from getting their goal, but a good opponent has the same goal.
So I'm just like, I can think of so many good books that don't have that.
Yeah.
You know? But I also can think of some books that like aren't that good, and I'm like, maybe if they had that, it would be better. So I do think that it depends, right? Like, I don't know. Like, it's all relative.
Yeah, that comment, Victoria, I think is you nailed it right there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because when I was reading this, I'm like, I already do a lot of this, like without having someone tell me to do it.
Right.
And that's why I was saying when he was being so explicit about being moral, I just feel like stories are always inherently moral, and I don't think you have to be so explicit, because they're always dealing with morality to an extent. You know, like, I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of opponents. It just feels like, and I also think that some stories lend themselves better to that. Like, I think if you're doing fantasy or even maybe science fiction, having a literal opponent makes more sense. It's that kind of storytelling, right? Where if there's like adventure or journey or whatever, like, I just think that those appear more often. But when you're talking about contemporary books or like slice of life books, I just don't think those kinds of opponents exist.
In contemporary?
Always.
Really?
No, I'm saying I don't think they always exist.
Oh, okay.
I feel like wrong because I was still thinking through the thought. But I do think that there are tons of books that have them, but I don't think all of them have them.
But you know what? My contemporaries don't have a literal main opponent, but they do have opponents that. Fuck, I think I do do that. I mean, because
I have to think about it because he is saying that there's always like one like sort of main opponent.
You think about it, like this won't make any sense to anyone but Laura, but my first book has someone who is kind of like the mean girl, and she does come in to try and stop his happiness for her own good. They don't necessarily want the same thing, but so I guess I do have.
But it's not a good opponent, Kevin, because a good opponent would want the same thing.
I mean,
they're going after the same want.
She does it out of like a familial tie. So I don't know. I mean,
good is relative. So I feel like as long as you have an opponent of some kind, whether it's a friend or a like villainous Voldemort, like I think you're good. Like,
I do feel like though that there are some books that the opponent is themselves. So there's not always an external opponent.
I think that books that do that.
But he's saying don't do that. He's saying that no.
I had to think of like classic books that are kind of like that.
I'm trying to think, like, I feel like there are books that don't have that, but then I can't think of any. So then maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Well, who is the opponent in like Metamorphosis?
I've never seen that. I don't know.
Well, okay, but we were talking about classic literary, and I don't even want to talk about classic literature because I want to try to apply this to real.
But everything else in this book does apply to literary.
Right, but that's what I'm saying is what's wrong with it. So I'm trying to find ways to make it apply to like what we're doing, and so like yeah, like oh, I see what you're saying though. Like that doesn't apply to all classic. I would say that a lot of classic literature does not have.
It's all about like
it's the internal opponent. So if he is writing this thinking of literary, then what the hell is he talking about? Because none of those always, tons of them do not have external.
I read in a craft book once that like books are either man versus world or man versus self.
Yeah.
And he's saying that you can't be versus yourself unless you can be your own opponent. Like
no, he's saying very explicitly you need to have an external opponent.
I mean, I'm trying to think about YA books.
Because here's what I'm thinking. Okay, I'm thinking of Becky's books in particular, right? Because I think Simon does, we have very external opponents, but then that's in Simon. But if you think about her other books, they don't.
Or like
what's the second one?
Upside of Unrequited?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, who's the opponent in
that? Wait. This man has never had depression where you're your own worst enemy.
Right.
Or like Anna and the French Kiss, is there like an opponent?
I feel like we can't really talk about those books because I love Stephanie Perkins. If you ever watch a 70, I love you. You know this. But those books are not popular because they're well written. They are not.
Well, Anna and the French Kiss might have an opponent because the boy she wants does have a girlfriend.
But she's an invisible opponent who's never even actually there.
But they do want the same thing.
True, they do
want ATN. I mean,
but think of Isla and the Happily Ever After. She's her own opponent. There's no other opponent.
I mean,
but also, hold on. But wait, I just remembered. He does say something about opponents that actually goes against that, where he says, well, he does. He says the opponent. He says if there's a love interest in the book, they're automatically the opponent.
Yeah, that's what Victoria just said. He also called the love interest.
What does that mean? I don't like that's
because I guess because they're just. That I don't really understand.
That's confusing to me too. And he also says the opponent can be more moral and nicer.
Page 6.
So they're not always bad.
No, because your character doesn't have to be. He says that your character doesn't have to be like the best person. Like, well, they can be flawed and like Godfather. The main character is not a good person.
Yeah. The only thing that's important about the opponent is they stop the main character from reaching the goal. They can be like a priest with the best intentions, but if they're stopping the main character from reaching their goal, they're an opponent. So, yeah.
But is the love interest going against your happiness if your happiness is the love interest? I don't know. I'm my brain.
That's confusing to me. He's like, if you have a love interest, they're inherently the opponent.
Well, Victoria said it's on page 62.
Oh, this is in love stories, though, specifically? Is that what this is about?
Yeah, I think so. Like
That
in the Philadelphia story. Never heard of it.
But I'm just wondering if. So is he meaning specifically romance?
I think he's in the genre of love story.
Okay. Well, still though.
Victoria said 95 is the four corner thing. Yeah, the four corner opposition. I mean, I don't. Is the opponent just an antagonist then? The love interest is not. I don't know. I'm trying to make sense of that advice, and it doesn't make sense to me. So I'll let you guys figure it out and tell me.
I don't know. Right, okay, he can't just be talking about genre, Lindsay, because he uses Tootsie as the example. Tootsie is not a romance.
Well, it is a romance.
No, that is not the premise of the movie. It has a romantic element, but it is not a romance.
She is one of
story. That's not what the book. That's not what the movie is.
But according to this, she is one of his opponents, right?
Right, but that's what I'm trying to say is he's not talking specifically about romance as a genre because Tootsie is not a romance.
Wait.
It has a romance in it, but most stories do. All stories do, really.
Is Julie the love interest? Because this says Tootsie, main opponent Julie. How does that work then? Why is she his main opponent? No,
because when you give one character the desire line, you automatically make him or her the more powerful character in terms of story function. This means that the lover, the desired one, is actually the main opponent, not the second hero. You typically fill out the character web, which character webs make no sense to me. I don't understand what he means by that. With one, I don't know, like to me, it was like, isn't that like, it felt like it was obvious. I don't know. With one or more outside opponents, such as family members who oppose the union. You may also have other suitors for the hero or the lover so that you can compare different versions. It sounds to me like he's just talking about there needs to be obstacles.
Caitlin's comment, I think that's what that means.
Yeah, I think okay, that makes sense to me. Because they have a different desire line.
Yeah.
But isn't he also saying though that your opponent should have the same desire line?
If they're a good opponent, they should have the same desire line.
Oh, I'm so confused.
Maybe like their goal is they want to be a couple, but the conflict is they have different reasons why they aren't a couple yet in the first two acts of the story. Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe I don't know. I didn't read over this very deeply, to be honest, because I don't write a lot of romance. So
yeah. But the thing is that he's not like specifically talking about romance, and in all honesty, almost all, it's just if you're thinking about film, they always have a love story. Every action film, they can't go without it. And I think they do that because if not, there would be absolutely no emotion in a plot-heavy action film, so you gotta just throw it in there, so that the women, no, that was a joke, so that people feel some sort of emotional connection. I don't know, it's a little things that make you go,
Everything in this book.
I do like though that it's like making me, it has overall, I will say that it's been successful in making me think about my own writing, because there are elements to my book that I feel like are not working as well as others, and then that makes me think, well, maybe it's because I don't have this. Maybe I should try doing this, and maybe that will fix that issue.
Yeah.
I just don't want to do that because I don't like it.
Just don't give him any credit. Just say you can't put that off the top of your head.
But that's what I was trying to say, is like it automatically just made me resistant to like anything he could have possibly said. And I gotta stop like doing that. It's like, okay, just because he sucks as a person doesn't mean he doesn't have something valuable to give me,
Every person in your life, no matter how horrible, teaches you something.
Yeah.
maybe they'll teach you to stay away from people like that, but everyone teaches you something.
Victoria, I pretend you heard it from Lindsay. I did hear it from Lindsay because the way she said it made more sense than him.
Ooh, Lindsay, you should write a craft book called Explaining John Truby.
Oh my gosh.
And then just for the love story part, just put, I don't know, I don't write these. And that's it.
Skip.
Ooh.
No, but seriously, read Story Genius because it is the closest to this without the tone. I will say Lisa Crone, bless her heart, she rambles. That's the only thing that I struggle with her books because she does go on and on. She's very anecdotal. And so you will read a whole chapter and the last 2 paragraphs will have the point of the chapter in it. But other than that, if you could get past that, it's like, do you want pretension or do you want rambling? Because you get to choose.
So I think I would like that better because that was basically me as a teacher. It was like 55 anecdotes about this thing and then the point. Like what you have. So it was like this one time when I was in the 8th grade and blah 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 like that. It was so me. I give too much of myself to other people. So I'm the queen of anecdotes and the queen of metaphors. I use very bizarre metaphors, but they always help you remember stuff. So
well, the thing is.
Sorry, someone said they wanted an annotated copy. When we were talking about the opponent web, like the X thing, I literally looked like the calculative woman like this. And I was trying to explain it to myself. That's what the annotated version would be me as that meme on all of the pages trying to explain it to myself.
I know, I wrote so many times.
Well, one thing I like about this book is he does do the key points. So at least if you don't understand some of the paragraphs, usually the key points would put it in a way that I could understand. So I did like that. I did highlight some of those. So
go ahead.
I was just like, I would read an entire section and be like, what the hell is he talking about? And then he'd say the key point. I was like, why couldn't you just say it like that from the beginning?
Right? Yeah. So, yeah. But I think I like anecdotes better.
Well, then you'll love that book.
Because I feel like people understand concepts when they see them through application.
That's how I work.
Which I think he was trying to do in his examples of film. They just weren't the best choices.
Here's Tootsie 400 times. Love it. I looked up to see if he worked on it.
Is this just really a low-key push to get
I really did. I was like, did he write this or work on it in any way?
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, I think the Lisa Crone discussion is a great way to segue into what we're going to read for next time. So I'm going to do a whole video that talks more about the next one, because I'm still trying to figure out date, time, co-host, that kind of stuff. But I do know the book. So I'm just going to say that in here and then stay tuned. If you don't subscribe to me, ding. That video will be out later this week on when we're going to do it. But I want to do, we're going to read, why did I forget the title of it? Is it Wired?
Wired for Story.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. The book is Wired for Story by Lisa Crone. I chose it for a couple of different reasons. One, as you guys have heard me drone on because it was one of the highlights of my life that I took a creative writing course with Francesca Leah Block.
One of Laura's anecdotes.
Yeah, one of my anecdotes I love to bring up. It's that one time you met someone famous. Okay. She really pushes that book. She really thinks that it's important on understanding the psychology of writing and understanding what people look for in storytelling. And she's really and I've never read it, even though she pushes it a million times. And she also teaches now for UCLA creative writing and stuff. And she makes that book mandatory. And she bases all of her coursework on stuff from that book. So I felt okay, she really pushes this a lot. This should be an important book. And plus I love psychology stuff. That's totally my thing. And also though, I feel it's the opposite of what this is, which is more structure, plotting, technical, whereas Wired for Story is more the psychology of storytelling and what kinds of things to do psychologically in our text that will get people wanting to read it and wanting more. So the book is half the length of this, and it is much less dense, and as Lindsay says, full of anecdotes and rambling. So that sounds exciting. So again, Some of you may have already read it, maybe not, whatever. I will do a whole video that, like, again, we'll give all the rest of the info, like what date we're going to do it, co-host time, etc. Also, if you are like me, I need to have physical craft books because I annotate them. Amazon is like behind on, now I don't know about indie booksellers and stuff, but Amazon is waiting to deliver. Like, I'm not getting mine until April 25th. So that's another reason why I wanted to mention it now. It's not going to be until mid to late May. I can tell you that much that we'll do it. But that gives you some time to get the book. Either, or if you want to get it, you know, through your library, it might take a while to get it like that or whatever. So I don't have the date yet, but it will be mid to late May, and I will have a video up this week that will give, I'm still waiting on a few things before I can finalize any of that.
If you want to go through an indie, you can get it quicker. I looked at Mysterious Galaxy will ship it out within the next 1 to 5 days.
Oh, that's great. See, the only reason why, because I'm all for buying from indies, is that I had a gift card for Amazon. So I'm broke, right? Like, the purse strings are tight these days. So I needed to use the gift card to get it, or I would have gotten it from an indie. So I'm not getting that until April 25th.
Well, here's what I'll also say, though, about Mysterious Galaxy in particular, because I looked it up when we first started chatting earlier. They are shipping media mail, so it will take longer. So if you want to order it. It is free shipping, though. They are doing free shipping. So it's $15 at Mysterious Galaxy, free shipping, but it's media mail. So it might take like a week or two to get there still.
We should look at Romans, too. That's another indie that we really like.
I just specifically looked because I couldn't remember which ones were around. So I
was trying to think of like ones that we've shopped at frequently. Roman,
I live close. Yeah. I live close-ish to both. So it shouldn't take too long for them to get here, but just keep that in mind. If you want to order it media mail, free, but it will take longer. But again, like Laura said, it's not until May. So
yeah, it'll be mid to late May. Most likely the weekend after Mother's Day, but it might be later. I have to finalize a couple things first. It's Lisa. I'm just gonna put it in the chat and then put it up so that you can. But this is like I said, was pushed by and Lindsay has read it.
Yeah, do you want me to get it so people can see what it looks
like? If you have it, that would be.
Come on a journey through my house. Don't judge me for how gross it is.
Your house isn't gross.
Let's see. Here's my lovely. Let's see if I can show it to you.
Oh, don't spoil it alert though for your video.
Woo. This one right here. Let's see. Oh my gosh! If my bookshelf falls on me on live,
on live YouTube.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Okay. It's
Don't hurt yourself.
Saved it. I saved the world.
She saved the world yet again.
This is what it looks like. Wired for Story.
So that's what we'll be reading next. It's talking about the psychology. It's using brain science to hook your readers from the very first sentence.
Brain science. Why?
I live for psychology. I believe everything is psychologically driven. So.
Why didn't they just say, though, the writer's guide to using psychology to hook readers instead of brain science?
Well, because brain science, so there's a whole thing on using the word brain instead of the mind.
It talks about specific, like, regions of your brain, too.
Yeah.
Oh, God, I think I'm going to hate this book.
I don't think you will. Yes, you can get it online. You can get it on Amazon, on local... like indie booksellers, they will you can order it from them online. When I do my video next week, I'll have a link to a couple of different places you can get it. So yeah.
Ooh, I wonder if the audiobook's on Scribd.
But it's about half the length. I feel like it's more accessible in language from what I've seen. So yeah, so I'm excited for that. And then after this one though, I will be looking for recommendations. Because these were the two that I knew I wanted to do, was Anatomy of Story and then Wired for Story. So I'm definitely looking for recommendations for the one after that, which will take place sometime in June or something. So if you have any recommendations, you can send them to the Instagram, Let's Talk Craft Book Club Instagram. DM me on that. And I'll probably, even if you don't follow that, follow it. Because what I'll probably do is narrow it down to 2 and then have people vote after that. So... yeah, Victoria, that's probably a little different.
So this says that Wired for Story, the PDF, as well as the audiobook are both on Scribd. So you can read it.
Oh, nice. Did not know they were on Scribd.
You don't even have to buy it. Wait, is it just the first 15 pages? It might just be the first 15 pages, but the audiobook's on here.
See, when it comes to learning, I have to do kinetic. I'm a kinetic learner, so I have to either be writing in the text or typing up notes or whatever for me to actually understand things. So that's why I can't do audio books. But
okay,
and certainly I just can't. I can't absorb information that way.
Okay, so it is just the 15-page like trial, but the whole audiobook is on there if you want to listen to it.
This is the format too. You have the chapter, and then you have a quote, then you'll have the actual info, and then at the very end you have like a checklist.
Ooh,
So
I like that.
that'll be really helpful, I think. Even if you have the audio at the end, just
The publisher is 10 Speed Press, and I'm pretty sure they published another writing book I've read.
Is it Story Genius?
Shut up, no. Oh, they publish like a lot of chakra essential oil books, and
oh my God, you read chakra essential oil books?
no, and it's like nonfiction books usually.
Oh. So yeah. Well, thank you, Victoria. I think this is a good book chat, you guys. I think we made it through. We had some intellectual discussion about writing. I don't know. I will say, like I said, overall, even though I think he kind of sucks as a person, from what I gathered, I definitely think there are some things in here that are having me rethink some elements of my story, especially ones that I feel like are not doing what I want them to do. So I think this was very helpful. I am excited, though, to think more about the psychology of writing, because I feel like a lot of times with craft, we tend to focus so much on the literal and not the sort of psychological, philosophical sort of aspects of it. So I'll be excited to have that chat. Yeah, so thank you, Kelly. Of course, I'm only putting up the quotes where people are praising and not kidding. No, I think I love just like, and especially like I love hearing from you guys and having different perspectives, because I know that I'm always coming at it from one direction, and it's good to hear other people, the way they interpreted things or the way they think about it or how they applied it differently, I think is really helpful.
Side note.
Yeah.
Person that published Wire for Story, the reason why I recognize them is they published Marie Kondo's book.
Oh, it's the same publisher?
Yes.
Yeah, so, all right, any parting thoughts on the book, writing, who we are as people? No.
Stay safe and wash your hands. Sanitize your phones.
I did hit 1,000 subscribers. I'm very excited. Thank you guys so much for that. Although I have yet to get my community page. I'm waiting on it, YouTube. Where are you?
Which is the only thing Laura wanted out of it was the stupid.
That's what I wanted. I want the community page. Because I hate, like, if I have something I need to tell people that I can't. I don't have a way to tell them. So
she has me do it.
Yeah, so that's like annoying.
And now I can just tag Laura in the description instead of putting your freaking URL.
That is also nice. Yes. So thank you to everyone who has subscribed. If you have not subscribed to me and Lindsay and Kevin, please do so. The information is in the description. I would recommend, if you're only going to subscribe to one of those, subscribe to Lindsay. Kevin sucks. No, just kidding. Love you, Kevy. Subscribe to both of them. I can't go one live without saying something mean, nasty, or rude to Kevin. It's just not. It's not in my nature. It's not who I am as a person fundamentally. So I wouldn't be a good big sister if I didn't tell him that he sucked at least once. So I have to keep him humble. Hashtag humble, Kevin.
I self-deprecate myself to keep myself humble.
I'm sure this is damaging him psychologically.
Yeah.
I'm giving him tons
you're
of
doing something immoral.
Sessions, okay?
Or you're doing something immoral. Where's your arc?
Yeah. No. I'm just slice of life, Kevin.
That was an evil laugh. No.
Oh, it looks like Word Nerds is hosting a sprint if someone's looking for that. So
nice.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. This was a lot of fun. I look forward to the next one. And be on the lookout for that video this week on more information of when that will be and all of that good stuff. So, all right.
I'm very hungry.
All right. So yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to like this if you haven't yet. And yeah, wash your hands.
Sanitize your phone.
Sanitize your phone. Stop going outside your house. Okay.
Eat a Clorox wipe.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.